Welcome to the THRIVERY podcast, the show that explores elevated living. I'm your host, JC Angel Smith, and in this community, we engage in conversations to inspire you to flourish in all aspects of your life, because you weren't created to merely survive. You were designed to thrive. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the THRIVERY podcast. We're in for a treat. You are going to love my special guest today. This is episode 5, and I can't wait for this conversation. Let me just read a little bit of a bio about my special guest. She's an author and teacher, podcaster, and church leader with a master's in theology and culture. Sue is active in teaching and writing about transformative faith. Her book, Soul Speak, Praying Change into Unexpected Places, won a Selah Award in 2020. She and her husband, Shane, co-host a podcast called Stress Test, which focuses on leadership, health, and tension. And they recently released their new book, Death by Pastoring, Finding the Heartbeat of a Healthy Leader. Sue loves traveling and hanging out with Shane, their 3 sons, and their 2 daughters-in-law. Welcome to the show, Sue Schlesman.
Yay. Thank you, JC. I'm so honored to be on this podcast with you. Mostly, I think we're just going to have a really good time talking, as we always do. I think because we're taping it, that means we can't talk over each other the whole time. So that will be a nuanced conversation for us.
That's so true. You and I, when we get together, I affectionately call you my roomie. We're always going to be roomies. I've had the pleasure and honor of being your roommate the last 2 years for a conference that we attend together. And I'm sure there will be future ones and fun times, but we will, we get to go back and forth here, but we could talk for hours. This could easily become, like you and I were talking, a 3-episode episode. But we'll just have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so awesome to have you here.
Great memories. And we're getting better at our time together, because last time we drove together, which meant that we didn't have to stay up all night, which was a really good switch up to the previous conference when we were thoroughly exhausted.
We stayed up really late that night, but it was such a good conversation. Well, you mentioned reading, and we are definitely going to talk about the fact that you're an author and you've written several books. We're going to talk mainly about 2 right now. We'll mention the other ones too, but before we get into the books, because I'm so excited for you guys. I'm so excited for you and for Shane and for everything that you guys are doing. But just a side note, it's not really a side note. It's kind of a big thing, but I just want to honor you right now because you're my pastor's wife. You pastor over me. And so it is such a unique honor and privilege to have you here today. I just love you so much. You pour into all of us, and it's just a treat to have you here.
Thank you. It's a blessing to be in that role, to have you a part of our body and contributing. You bring so much to the table, and it's been, I think, a delightful surprise that we have so many shared interests that we're crossing over. It's just, I just always find it interesting that in every season of life, God brings new people, and it sort of thwarts the idea that, you have these friends that you grow up with and they are your best buddies forever, and it never changes out of that, which I'm sure is true for many people and is a good thing. I mean, I still love people that I grew up with, but I think there's something really special about the fact that God brings you people for seasons in your life.
Yes, absolutely. I'm grateful for this season. I'm grateful that he has brought us to this intersection, that we're able to be in each other's lives, and you really bless me. And so we're going to have so much fun talking. I want to jump into the books, ones that I mentioned actually in your bio when I was introducing you. I've read them, and it was so funny when I read Soul Speak. I was actually on vacation and I was reading it, and I was just thinking to myself, this is amazing how I'm still learning about you. Like, I'm learning stories about you. You were really vulnerable and you were sharing, deeply personal stories about your life. And I just felt like I was right with you. And what was so special about it is I could hear you. It was almost like you and I were having a conversation, and it was in your voice that I was reading it. And that made
Yeah.
it even more
Yeah.
special. But I really love Soul Speak. And I absolutely love Death by Pastoring. And that is something that you co-wrote with your husband, Shane, my pastor. Both of those books talk about overcoming challenges in your life. And I just wanted to know if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit with our listeners, the inspiration behind writing these books with that common theme of this, overcoming stress or crises or challenges in life.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I'm so impressed that you read both of them and in a recent period of time, not that they're hard reading, but yeah, I think anything that is pivotal or life-changing for a person has to come from a deep place someplace else. So none of us our lives are not dramatically moved, inspired, challenged by some cliche response that somebody might have, right? We're moved by narrative. Narrative is a super powerful medium. And I think not that you need to know all the deep, dark secrets of someone's life, but I think there's an aspect of vulnerability and relatability that makes truth accessible to other people. So, if we were having a writing podcast, we could talk about that, which is a difficult art form, to be vulnerable without being exposing everything and everyone. But I think in both of I don't know any other way to be than to be authentic if I'm writing or speaking. So it just doesn't feel worth my time in what I'm listening to or reading or what I'm writing or speaking about if it's not real. And if it's not something that could help someone, because it also doesn't help anyone just for me to throw therapy on a page, right?
Right.
So I think the similarities is reason. I probably have a twofold reason to write or to speak or just to be in relationship with anybody. It's, we're all learning about where we fit in the world. So our relationship with a creator, whether we're, Jesus followers or not, our relationship with the world that we've been placed in, and then understanding ourselves, which is complicated. I mean, the older I get, the more I realize, wow, I do not know myself as well as I thought I knew myself. There's always more layers of the onion to peel back as I'm willing to be authentic. So in terms of these two books, I think some crossover is that accumulated grief and trauma creates stress, right? Yeah. And stress challenges our faith. It challenges our belief system, how we thought life should be, what we thought about ourselves, what we thought about work or our family. All of that is challenged when that relationship or that circumstance is kind of put under pressure. And that's where I think I said it in Soul Speak, but that's where our faith is shown to be for what it actually is, right? Is how do we respond when something is really difficult and I find myself in a position to be suffering or to be confused. What do I do with that now? Am I trying to make my faith fit my situation? I'm trying to make my situation fit in with my faith, or do I have to throw faith out, which happens to a lot of us because we can't figure out how to reconcile the two. So accumulated, conversely, and this is the good thing about difficult situations, accumulated acts of courage create resilience. And resilience is our ability to endure spiritual, emotional, mental, physical problems, right? So this is life, is the getting back up and not making lemons out of lemonade. I don't advocate something quite that cliche because life is harder than that. Yeah. But it's accepting the suffering and then adapting to it. And adaptation means that I move forward and thrive, right?
Right.
If I don't move forward, I get stuck. And that's where we find a lack of freedom and a lack of identity and, all the negative emotions that will then start spiraling. So I think in a nutshell, I would say reality and resilience equal, to use your term, thrivery.
Yes, I'm so glad that you talked about like how much do we share? You and I had this conversation recently. And I think it's so important that, obviously sharing is important and knowing what to share is important. But I so appreciate in both books, actually, just your transparency, because I think so many times people, you paint this picture that as a leader or a pastor that everything's great and you don't have challenges if you know God, and people can have that perception, but you are just so real and authentic about it. And I think it's just a breath of fresh air, especially for people who it could be really discouraging, right? If they are feeling those things, stress, or in their crises, or, they're experiencing whatever in life, the challenges in life, that you're just able to say, yeah, challenges are real, they happen. And here's what I've found that has really worked for me. And I think it's just a really great opportunity to explore those things. And you talked about thriving, so I've got to go on that. I'm going to ask you what thriving means to you. I would love to know your definition of thriving.
I think thriving is being our true selves. So I think a person is thriving when their reality and their authentic selves are meshed together. A lot of us can pretend to do well for a while. We can, put all the systems in place. And I mean, this is the nature of social media, right? To pretend to live a way that's not realistic, to live in a highlight reel kind of life. And that's not thriving, that's pretending. And I don't think thriving happens with any pretense. I think integral to a life of thriving is a recognition that there is striving and there is stress and there is suffering. And I have adapted to this tension, this struggle, and I'm moving forward. Doesn't mean I'm a success story, but I am living in my authentic self. And that is very difficult, which we talk about this quite a bit in Death by Pastoring, which honestly is for any leader, anybody in leadership, anybody actually who has a pulse will find this to be true, that many of our decisions and our personality traits and our actions revolve entirely around expectations, what other people expect of us, what we think or interpret that other people expect of us, what I expect of myself. So I'm an Enneagram 1, which has strong perfectionist tendencies. So I'm my own worst critic. And that's just as unhealthy as trying to measure up to somebody else, right? So our expectations get in the way of thriving because we can digress into this little fantasy world of how I think success looks. And that's what I spin my wheels trying to achieve. And therefore, I have a life of strife and stress and tension and anxiety rather than a life of freedom. So that's a really long answer to a simple question.
It's a really good answer to my
is.
question, which is you just proved my point. I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's the breath of fresh air because it's just a real answer. It's not painting thriving as perfection or, everything's great and wonderful. You still have challenges. You still have those things in life. And it's about, I love the piece of authenticity. It's so vital, I think, in strive and not thriving. Thriving, not striving. I'm getting tongue
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody thinks that other people have it easier.
Yeah.
It's our natural, self-absorbed perspective to think that other people get all the breaks, they get all the good luck, everything good happens for them, their life is perfect, and everything's hard for me. The victim mentality doesn't have to be taught to us. I think we can learn that early on, and certainly it can be reinforced, which I think happens. But anyway, everybody does not have it better. I mean, some people may have better opportunities, but we all have to be our authentic selves in the situations where we find ourselves in order to feel freedom.
Freedom is a good thing. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Being authentic is where you find freedom. So I love that definition. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you're authentic and you're real. And I want to shift into, we're first going to start with soul speak, and then we will end with death by pastoring. But there are just a few questions that I wanted to ask you. I absolutely loved this book, by the way.
Yay,
the whole
thank
time I
you.
was just like, oh my goodness, friend, this is my friend. It's so good. Listeners will love it. They will love it. I encourage you to go out and buy this book, and we will give you all the resources at the end of how you can connect with Sue and everything that she's doing. But yes, Soul Speak. It was just this beautiful, again, you being really authentic and transparent and sharing these vulnerable times in your life and how you prayed through it. And you give these 7 patterns of prayer. You talk about really heartfelt, effective, really insightful ways of looking at prayer in this book, and how these patterns, these 7 patterns, can help leaders to cultivate a deeper and more authentic prayer life to thrive. So I would love if you could share a little bit about what these 7 patterns are with our listeners, just so they have a little sneak peek into what you've written in Soul Speak.
Thank you. So Soul Speak essentially is adjusting our perspective towards soul care through the avenue of prayer. Statistics say that, I forget what it is now, it's been a while, but 90% of the world prays for something like that. And not everybody prays for the same reasons or to the same God or whatever, but there is an inborn, natural, created quality of reaching out for help, asking for blessing, wanting. I mean, I believe God has created, in the Bible, it says that God has created almost like a hole, like a desire in our souls to know him. And so no matter what we do to fill that hole, the things we buy, the people we know, the stuff we accomplish, no matter what we do in life, our soul will still crave intimacy with the person that created us. I think that's very similar to how parents feel about their children. Yeah. Right? You can have the biggest fight in the world, or even be estranged from one another, but that craving to be intimate with your child, or for a child with a parent, never goes away, even if it's a bad parent. There's that stress and tension over a relationship. But anyway, so as I was trying to figure out, so this is where it started, to be honest. So I've been a Christian basically my whole life, and I was dissatisfied with prayer. I felt like I don't like this idea that prayer is like a box that I check. It's a spiritual discipline or a ritual that I have. Like, I want my prayer to be powerful. I'm not, otherwise why do it? I'm not really, I sort of wrestled with the whole how and why. And so I just started reading through all the prayers in the Bible. It turns out the Bible is full of prayers. Not just in the book of Psalms, which is entirely prayers and songs, but many, many other places. And so I was comparing all the prayers to see what are people who get their prayers answered, right? Because that's the goal.
I want that.
That's the whole point to most people is, I want to pray for something. I want to pray for my kid to get well. I want to pray for safety. I want to pray for a way to pay this bill. I want to pray for something and have it work. So why are my prayers not working? And so I just did a lot of study about what people prayed for, whose prayers got answered, whose prayers didn't, how'd they get answered. And instead of finding a formula, I found some interesting overlap in the prayers. And that was the types of prayers that people prayed and the order in which they prayed them. So a prayer could say Jonah in the belly of the fish. Had a couple different kinds of prayers going on in a super short prayer that only lasts for like one verse. And I found this to be true across the board, particularly David, who wrote most of the Psalms, and sort of his language of communication with his Father in heaven, whether he was angry or frightened or sad or guilty or happy or whatever, all the whole range of emotions. And the 7 types of prayer were this, and in my opinion, they basically always occur in this order, or in some, not necessarily all 7 things happen in every prayer, but when they do, they typically would follow this order. And that is start with praise, which this was revolutionary to me, because I'm like, well, I don't really want to praise God about being so amazing until I've seen, like, are you going to show up for me here?
Yeah.
But that's not what praise is. Praise is worship for who somebody is, not for what somebody does. So start with praise, then they move to confession, and then lament, and thanksgiving, and request. So request is like number 5 on the list, which typically that's pretty much what most people think about when they think of prayer. I need something. It's not till number 5. And intercession and spiritual warfare are 6 and 7. So here's what I discovered, the connection between them. When I'm praising God for who he is, I'm very acutely aware of who I am and my flaws and my sins. So, people have been going to confessionals and all of that kind of thing for centuries, but there is a cleansing and a reorientation that happens when I'm willing to say, I was wrong. I am wrong. I'm selfish. And to flush that out, right? We know our kids aren't truly sorry for something if they can't own it. If they just say sorry and then run back out to play, they're just saying what they have to say so that they can get their freedom back. And that's not confession. Confession is owning the grievance. So if I sit in God's presence, I know who he is, and then I'm aware of who I am. And once I know who I am, it changes the way that I look at my crises. So lament is the 3rd one. And lament is probably has been the most radical adjustment in my life. Praise also really changed for me, but lament is not something that we do in America. That's not a part of our culture.
Right.
We advocate, we get angry, we pass legislation, we sue people, we take revenge. We do a lot of things when we're upset, but we don't lament to God. And if you're in Israel and you stand at the Wailing Wall, it is an overwhelming observation that this is a part of culture, and not just for Jews. A lot of ancient cultures, many cultures around the world, not America, but other places, that lamentation, a grieving process that continues, a sorrowful process that continues, has such a healing quality to it, and it has a perspective shift, because if I'm lamenting, I'm unburdening myself on someone who can control things rather than me trying to maintain control. And whenever I try to maintain control of a situation, I bear the stress of that. And scientifically, I stay in fight or flight. Like my brain, my body, my hormones, all of that stuff stays in hyper awareness to an injustice or a trauma. And the obsession then begins with that thing, fixing it, making someone pay for it, right? And so a lament is a release out of that crazy cycle into, I don't know how you're going to do this, but because I've already praised you, I trust that you do good.
Yeah.
And because I've already confessed my stuff, there's nothing between us. So now I can offload this burden onto you. People do this even if they don't believe in God. They'll offload things into the cosmos, right? They'll try to figure out a way to unburden. And when I'm able to do that, I can be very thankful for the things that I do have. If God is a genie in a lamp and I rub it to get what I want, there's no thankfulness there. And then my requests, which is the next one, are only selfishly motivated. They can't be any other way because I feel entitled to the wish that I'm asking for. And then I have the audacity to be mad that God doesn't give it to me.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't worshiped him for who he is. I've just worshiped or talked about what I want him to be, which is the genie, right? Anyway, so it continues like that. So I think it's transformative to reassess who is God. Do I even know him? And does that change my perspective? Because the stories that we have, the narratives that we have about people who were with God were radically changed individuals.
Yeah.
So they didn't just meet Jesus or meet God or meet the Holy Spirit and be like, okay, back to my normal life. They were radically changed. And so that might be a little telltale sign. But now I've already forgotten. Oh, you were asking about 7 types of prayer. So
you're doing it. Love it.
Yeah. So those are the 7 types. And for me, it's been transformative. For a lot of other people, it's been transformative. And I didn't make it up. I just was observing. So God already put all of this into place. And, honestly, I think even people who aren't of the Christian faith would be able to articulate that these same types of practices exist all over the world, and there's a healing quality to it. I'm not going to say every religion's the same and everything you do is the same, but certainly chemically, emotionally, mentally, there are changes that happen when you pray. There's the brain chemistry alters, your trauma responses change praying.
I've seen those studies. I've read those studies.
Yeah, it's
interesting, right?
Hospitals, doctors, nurses will talk so much about this, that praying, somebody coming in and praying next to a person who's dying or in a coma or in great pain or whatever, who they don't think is going to make it, has a lot of medicinal qualities to it. But anyway, so I'm a big fan of prayer, actually.
It's interesting that you were talking about Lamentations not being something we're really familiar with. That was the one that stood out for me. I mean, I don't think that I had incorporated that completely. Not that I get it right every time in those steps, but that was just something that was so interesting that you mentioned that, because it isn't something that we are familiar with as much in our culture. But I always talk about, there is healing in tears. When we release those things, there's healing there. And so I just think that it was really interesting that you brought that up. And I would love to know, before we move into death by pastoring, I just want to know, based on what you just shared, how has this type of praying personally transformed your life? And specifically, since we're talking about stress and crisis and all of the things, how has it transformed your life in regards to those things?
Well, I don't do it all the time. So once again, nobody's perfect. But I do notice that when I am in one of those negative mental spirals, which we all have, where everything is terrible, nothing good is going to happen, nobody loves me, there's no, that whole negative self-talk thing that we all, and I think everybody engages in that in some form, whether they want to admit it or not. I think the healthier you are, the shorter the spiral. But that negative spiral is only fixed for me by worship and prayer. I can only jettison from that when I take my eyes off my problems and myself. And we are spiritual beings. So until there's a spiritual solution for everything, that doesn't mean I pray and all my problems vanish. It means that it's a part of the building resilience. It's a part of an endurance aspect to my life that helps me get through things And we can, and I'm glad I'm not surprised that you said lament hits you the most. That's what I hear from everybody.
Really?
Honestly, it's always the number one thing. And we have most of us engaged in practices of lament without realizing it. Certainly all forms of therapy and counseling utilize lament. They have people journal about their traumas. They have kids draw their traumas. I mean, this is the essence of music, right? I mean,
Yes.
what's country music if it's not
So
lamenting
true.
about all the things that are not right, right? This is rap music. This is all kinds of music
Yeah.
deal with a flushing out of what's not fair, what's not right, what's happening to me. It's therapy.
Mhm.
Dance, any kind of creative activity can be a therapeutic answer to stress, and it's super important for stress relief and for stress management is to be active, to make your brain shift. It's like get out of the middle brain, get out of the feeling brain, get to the thinking brain, get to the kinetic activity, get off the spiral.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
anyway.
interestingly enough, you mentioned all the different ways that there are some ways that we tend to lament. And I know when I was younger, I would write poems.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always think, why in the world can I have a nice, rhyming, beautiful poem, about nature or something? And it was never about that. It was always the lament, but that was definitely my therapy before I had therapy or even knew that I needed
Mm-hmm.
therapy. It was something that I've been doing, have volumes and volumes of. But if I look back on them, I'm like, huh, interesting. It's very melancholy. We'll call it
Mm-hmm.
melancholy. But definitely it was therapy for me. It was me lamenting. So that's really, really
Yeah,
interesting that you say it that way.
contemplation is a good thing.
Yeah.
um you know I mean, depression's not a good thing, but depression is not contemplation. Depression is despair. I have already decided that there's no hope. So lament is actually a form of thriving. It's an active engagement in transferring hopelessness and choosing to stay in it and work it out. There's a difference between mourning and um, being sad, right? So a healthy grieving process is not pretending somebody didn't die or some catastrophic loss didn't happen. Healthy grief, it takes on a mourning aspect that I will fully engage in missing this thing. I will acknowledge that is a huge loss in my life. And then I will decide that something new can happen after this. I can never, we spend way too much energy trying to put the genie back in the bottle or the
Mm,
tube back in the toothpaste. Like I miss my life when it was like this, or I miss
yeah.
this relationship that was like this. Well, that can never happen again because time has passed. So even if you get back together with somebody, you are different people now.
Yeah.
I can't I can't ever relive something that has happened, but I can move forward, and based on my life experience, I can embrace the possibility of something new as being equally wonderful. It's not that, oh, your life is going to be better, you know, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Like, let's leave the cliches off the table and just acknowledge, yes, that's a huge loss. I will miss that,
Hmm.
and I can't replace that, but maybe there's something else that I have never thought about doing, or a person that I have still not met yet, or a situation, a version of me that has yet to come into being that could be every bit as satisfying or um, fulfilling.
Right.
And let's choose that. That keeps me moving forward.
In October 2023, amidst the breathtaking Montana mountains, a THRIVERY experience emerged, giving life to its inaugural retreat, Ascend. Surpassing all expectations, This transformative event brought together over a dozen women in an immersive experience that left them empowered to uncover the visions and dreams that echoed in their hearts. Ascend transcended the typical retreat experience. It evolved into a shared odyssey of self-discovery, where every woman discovered a supportive sisterhood dedicated to the pursuit of an elevated life. The memories forged during Ascend will be cherished as an endearing chapter in Thrivery, and we're doing it again this year. I'm thrilled to announce the upcoming Thrivery experience for 2024. Innermost. Innermost will be held at an exclusive luxury property in 30A Seaside, Florida, on September 20th through the 22nd. The beach home is a haven of luxury in a coastal paradise, nestled in the charming and iconic town known for its pastel homes and white sand beaches. This spacious property is brand new, has lavishly appointed bedrooms and bathrooms, a custom-designed kitchen, and multiple common areas. The nearby beach is full of tranquil coastal charm, and the picturesque town is brimming with shopping, restaurants, and more. For more information and to save your spot, visit thrivery.store. I would just like to say, I would like to make an announcement right now that if I'm doing a reel, it's what just happened. It's what just happened. That was so good. Especially the beginning. I mean, all of it. The whole thing's good, but we could do many reels, but I love the distinction that you made just now between contemplation and depression. And that was like, I wanted to just be like, everybody listen. That was so good. So that will be when I learn how to do reels. That will be it. That was so good.
Yeah, well, send it to me because I don't know how to do reels either.
I'll send it to you when I figure it out, and we'll both share it for a reel. But no, that was really good. That was a really good. Wow. I'm going to re-listen to that. I'm going to listen to that a few times.
Yeah. And to your point, right? If you haven't been the person that's grieved deeply for something for years, or been in that depressive existence and feeling hopeless, then you can't come to that conclusion, right?
Yeah.
So all of us only develop resilience and wisdom by living in the valley and by going on those spirals.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, some people are more inclined to be glass half full and some are more inclined to be glass half empty, but that doesn't change the fact that everybody everybody suffers something. Yeah. And sweeping it on the rug is not therapy. So I can pretend that this doesn't bother me or this didn't happen. And there's, I think one thing I'm thankful for is that we live in a culture now that therapy is okay. Because there have been many, many generations that were forced to stuff everything.
Yeah.
And to cover up everything, to cover up the abortions and the miscarriages and the affairs and the mental illness and just any hurt. Like, we don't talk about it. That's not what we talk about in our family. Everything was made to feel shameful.
Yeah.
And that's a weapon. God doesn't make us feel shame. Otherwise, he wouldn't have died for us. Shame is a negative emotion and a negative feeling that only has injurious intentions. So being honest and transparent is actually the pathway to healing. There's no shortcut.
No, there's not. That's real number 2. That's real number 2. We're just building them as you just keep talking, and I'll just have a whole catalog before we're done. That was really good. I want to talk about your new book. This is so exciting that you wrote with your husband, Shane. It's called Death by Pastoring, and it delves into this, really for leaders and pastors, this stressful reality of what that looks like. Again, being transparent, being forthright and forthcoming and just real and authentic about what it looks like. And a lot of people don't talk about that. So I want to know what motivated you and Shane to write this book. And also, what are some key insights that you hope that people who read it will take home with them, they'll implement, they'll foster a healthier leadership approach? Maybe what are you hoping that people will gain from reading this book?
Well, because my husband's a pastor, and because we pastor and lead a church, our first target has been pastors, because this is where we see we have an epidemic of stressed out, burned out spiritual leaders in this country. Doesn't matter what faith or denomination you're talking about. The current statistic is actually worse now than it was during COVID or before COVID. And it's that 42% of ministry leaders think about quitting on any given day. They're thinking about quitting because the church culture, the expectations of church in this country are so catastrophically off the mark. And it's not like this, the last 5 years have been so horribly more difficult than any other 5-year period in American history. Certainly not. Yeah. We've had a lot of crises in this country that have been of a national proportion. But what we notice, and when we talk to people and when we do conferences or whatever, and we talk about this issue of stress and burnout, people just weep, because leaders, and this is true of any leadership, this is true in the business world. We've had a lot of business leaders like write a business one. We're like, well, the principles are the same.
Yeah.
Is that you carry the weight of the organization. Of course, the higher up you go, the more weight you carry.
Yeah.
Of its success or failure. Ministry, church life is a unique animal, because you're also carrying the spiritual weight. You're involved in people's mess every day. That's why they're affiliated with the church, right? They want somebody to do the funerals and the weddings and the separations and the divorces and the rebellious teenagers, and it's hard. It's like all the hard stuff. Nobody needs a pastor when things are going good, unless you get married. And there's a lot of expectation and weight, and it's 24/7. So, doctors that are on call would also feel that they can never get away from it. But nobody has their doctor's phone number and calls him on vacation.
Right.
Because they've got an ear infection,
right.
or whatever. Right. And so there's an accessibility that ramps up the stress. There's stress because ministry jobs aren't high paying, and yet you're living in a city or a town or a community with everybody else who's making a lot more money just to survive, and you've got to figure that out. There's a lot of stressors that are unique to pastors, but stress is stress.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a more stressful, I mean, some people would argue, but I'm not saying it's more stressful than some other job. There's many stressful jobs out there. I think there's a distinction in that pastoring isn't a job. Most pastors would feel that they were called to it, so it's not something they can walk away from. It's a calling, it's persona, it's job, it's family. It's all of that rolled into one. So anyway, so the burnout rate is high. I mean, all we have to do is watch news, right? People are always waiting for the next big catastrophe of some religious figure to fall from grace. And not to say that that is not that's not an epidemic. That's a symptom of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of people who are in this because not because they're going to make a lot of, I mean, I guess some people, charlatans maybe, but it's not a money-making, glory-seeking kind of a job. It's the opposite. And so why would somebody get in it and stay in it and then blow up their life or their family or their marriage? It's an indicator of high stress and no place to go with it. So anyway, so that has always been on our hearts. That's always been a concern of ours. My husband had a heart attack 2 years ago, 95% blockage to his widowmaker, which is your main artery. It's nearly impossible for anybody to survive that, and he survived 6 hours before he was rolled in to the operating room. It's unchronicled, and he's an athlete. He's fit. The only reason he survived that long is because his heart was so big and such a well-functioning muscle that the blood was water thin and just creeping around the blockage. There was actually a second blockage right below. They couldn't find anything wrong with him until they got in there and found the blockage. But he had been for several years in the leadership role that he was in, had all the signs of anxiety and crippling stress. And he just worked out harder. And, we did all the normal things. You put the vacations and the time off and the schedule, like you do all the tweaks to try to live a more balanced life. And the fact is, stress kills the body.
Yes.
What, 90% of doctors' visits are stress related. Our mental illnesses are our aches and pains, our cancers and strokes and heart attacks and liver diseases and rashes and I mean, so much stuff. Yeah, well, there's a biological cause for this, but underneath that biological cause is your brain thinking you're going to die, that there's a threat, and releases cortisone and adrenaline, and then releases more and releases more, and then the inhibitors form and block it from getting to the cells, and you live in a anxious, I mean, anxiety is the #1 mental illness in America. You live in an anxiety riddled life, and you learn to adapt. Like, everybody has stress. This is just what life is like. Marriage is stressful. Parenting is stressful. My job is stressful. My family relationships are stressful. This is life, right? And instead of thriving, we just hold on.
Yeah.
And we try to make tweaks here and there, but we talk ourselves into the fact that this is the way life is going to be. I need more vacations. If I had more money, whatever, all the things. And meanwhile, our brains are just sending out these signals that we're in danger. So more adrenaline, more cortisol. Well, these are stress hormones, like attack the problem, and just keep making it worse. And the body responds by making disease because it does not have healthy function anymore to fight the disease. So his heart attack which he survived, thank goodness, was a catalytic change for us. And we found in our podcast, Stress Test podcast, every leader has a catalytic moment where they're like, the way I'm living is not sustainable. Like when you're young, you can work like the 3 jobs or the 80-hour week or whatever. You can still be productive, and you're tired, and maybe you're, not always pleasant to be around, but you can do the work.
Yes.
And you're healthy, and you're like, I have this. At some point in your life, your body says, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And most leaders have that catalytic moment. They have the heart attack, they have the stroke, they have the affair with the nanny, they have the embezzling from their company, they have the mental breakdown, they have the thing that stops the world for them. And then they have to say, I have to do it differently. Or maybe it's just a sit down. The wife says, you're going to fix this. Or the husband says, this is going to stop.
Yeah.
Or we got a real problem here because I did not sign up for this. You are not present. You are not here. You are not rested. You are not healthy, whatever it is. So everybody has those catalytic moments. And for us, it was the heart attack. And it was a little bit tricky because he wasn't a drinker, he wasn't a smoker, he wasn't overweight, he wasn't not exercising. Like, he doesn't have it in his family. So we're, we go down the
doing
list.
all the
like,
things
okay,
right.
we can't fix any of this.
Yeah.
So all that's left is we got to change the way we live and handle stress. Or this is going to happen again. And his heart's not probably making it through another heart attack.
That's actually what I was going to ask you. Like, how did this shift your perspective of the demands that come along with the job? What do you do now that this happens and something has to change? And actually I have 2 questions. That's my first one. So I'll let you start with that one. But how did it change your perspective?
Well, I think the first perspective is that I'm fallible and I'm not eternal, right?
Sure.
So, we all have that moment with that brush with death where you're like, oh, I could have died, and how would my life be different? So there's that wake-up call that healthy people can die too. I think the big obvious question and the obvious answer to most people is, how about a different job? Like,
that
should
was
I
my
quit?
second question. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we quit? Is it just the job? I mean, he was a workaholic in the business world first. So it's not just a job, it's his personality.
Right.
But, and expectations and learned behavior and all the things. High performance, high achiever, like, we always prided ourselves on that. Like, we can multitask the heck out of anything. Like, bring it on, right? You always ask a busy person to do something. So, so we had to explore all of that, the perfectionism and the workaholism. That's all in the book too. But the do I quit is a simple answer to a complex question. So if performance or production or perfectionism is the thing that makes me good at what I do, which it probably is, does that change because I take a different job? No, because that's the thing that made me good. So I'm going to do it all again at the next job, and I'm going to end up in the same position that I'm in right now. I mean, I could quit a job and not work at all, right? Early retire if I could afford to do so, and still have the same issue, because I have to produce, perform, perfect whatever it is that I'm doing. So this is the classic problem of the higher achiever retiring with nothing to do.
Yeah.
Right. Deep depression. Because work is meaningful. We're supposed to work. We're wired to work. So the issue is, why don't we work smarter? Like, what is the problem? We're working the wrong way, or our bodies would not be killing themselves. If we're designed to work, there has to be a way for us to work and be healthy at the same time.
Right. I just remember this another vulnerable moment for you that you share in this book where it's like I can just imagine. I think anyone can relate to this. Your husband just had a heart attack and he wakes from surgery and you ask the question, can we be done? I can totally relate to that. I mean, not that I've been through it, but I can imagine I would be saying the same thing. And I
And
know that you guys
yeah.
had to decide, okay, like you were just saying, like this is who I am and I can retire, but then I'm going to be bored and this is my passion, this is my character, this is who I am. So something had to change. How did you guys get from, okay, we're not going to quit the ministry, but we are going to do things differently? Like how did you, because that had to be very intentional. It had to be a process, or I don't know, did it just come to you? Walk us through, how did you get to this place of where you are today, where you had to make some substantial changes in your day-to-day lives? What happened? How did you do it?
Well, we haven't done it. We're still doing it. And retirement wasn't an option, or we would have taken it. And we don't have the money to retire. But I think I think every person, right, that is stressed at their job goes through this process. Do I need another job? Is that the solution? And it may very well be the solution. It may be that you're in a toxic workplace. It may be that you're a square peg in a round hole. It may be that this is not the right position. We tend to be stressed over the things that we're not good at, but forced to do, right? So we all have aspects to our work life that are like, this is not the fun part of my job, but it has to be done. And that's what causes stress. Yeah. We get amped by doing the things that we're good at. Mm-hmm. We get stressed by doing the things that we're not good at. So, how much is that? How much is the job? How much is me? Maybe, I think, first of all, it goes back to vulnerability. We got to do some soul searching. Right. Am I an unhealthy person? Do I have unhealthy rhythms in my life? And I got to change that first. The heart attack is a symptom. The job might be the cause, but probably it's more a symptom of the person himself or herself. And there's an added little bit of confusion, I think, for pastors, because pastors feel called to ministry. It feels like a God-given calling. And so leaving is a little bit more complex. It's also family. So leaving is rooting up my family. Generally, I can't stay in the same town, or I can't stay in the same church. So it becomes a little bit, complex. And that could be true for other jobs too. But I think, like we talked about at the beginning, when we're thriving is when we're our true selves. So in what aspect of this situation that I am presently in that's causing me to die in some way, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, in what way am I not being my true self? It may be the culture, the job culture. It may be that I have a massive marriage crisis that I've been ignoring and that's why I'm always at work, which is why I'm stressed, which is why the job is hard. Or it could be, that we see this all the time in ministry because we're dealing with people in their crisis points. It can be, a child with terminal illness changes the entire family.
Yes.
Even if that death is not imminent, like even if it's 10 years you got to live with this, it changes the whole family. It changes their personality, changes their culture, changes how they interact. Relationally, we have difficulty remaining ourselves in trauma. Like trauma changes us. It changes us spiritually and emotionally and biologically. So all these things have to be looked at. So to say, when we tweaked our schedule and we took some more vacations is a nice thing that everybody can copy, but it's not the truth. The fact of the matter is we said, all right, job aside, well, this is fine. We can quit. That's not the most important issue here. The most important issue is changing the way that we're living, changing our workaholic tendencies, changing our expectations, keeping out the expectations of others that are making us do things that bring us stress.
Right.
I mean, it really all comes back to self-care.
Right.
I can blame other people for making my life harder, but the real crux of the issue is, how am I facilitating people making my life harder? How am I letting that into my soul and into my spirit so that I live on the hamster wheel and just keep performing until I fall off of it, you know? So I get, you know, if you're looking for some simple things, creating new rhythms is super important.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about this later too, maybe, but a rhythm is a habit that becomes a part of your life that you do regardless of what's happening. And the problem with most people is we don't think about our habits until everything's going off the rails.
Yeah.
And then we try to incorporate new habits. I'm giving up junk food. I'm not watching TV for 3 hours a night. I'm going to get outside and walk. I'm going to not go to those family functions that stress me out. I'm going to not take a certain kind of meeting. Like, all of those might be healthy boundaries, but the time to establish those is when I'm in a place of health, not when I'm in a place of crisis. We do it in crisis because we have to, but then it doesn't stick, because as soon as we feel like we're out of crisis, we go back to what feels normal.
Yep.
And what feels normal is probably workaholism or dysfunction, or, you know, whatever our thing is. So it takes, we're taking time to establish new rhythms, and we keep catching ourselves slipping back into the old ones. So then we have to re-up and do it again. And the new rhythms keep us focused on health without being, you know, I mean, you know, and be like, it's all about me and everyone must adapt to these new, you know, everyone must eat like I eat and exercise like I exercise. It's not that. It's setting parameters around ourselves so that when the next crisis hits, which it will, because that's life.
Yes.
When the next crisis hits, I won't be thrown from my routine. It might throw me, but the routines actually create stability. So some people are hyper routine oriented. Some people are more loosely structured. And I think that just depends on the person. And you have to figure out what works in your life. And if it's 2 people in marriage, or 5 people as a family, or 6 people, it's like, it gets more complicated to figure out what your rhythms are. But everybody needs rhythms so that when life stops being normal, you are able to sustain a normality that reduces your anxiety, because normal is where we're not anxious. Anything off the normal chart stresses us out. It could be like super fun, super dangerous. We're all going skydiving today. Well, that's going to set me off, because that is not my normal. I don't
have that. Skydiving.
No, we'll never do that. I don't have that. That's not my normal adrenaline rush, right? Cleaning a closet is my normal adrenaline rush. That I can get all over, but I'm not jumping out of an airplane. And so I think we all need to know what's normal and healthy for us, and know that when we do something out of that, we're going to feel stress, but it's okay. I can choose to do it if I know I'm going right back to my normal. Like, but if this is my life forevermore, this is why war and things like that are so hyper traumatic for people and takes years and years to recover from. Because jumping out of an airplane every day for the next 3 years is not normal. Doing it in, you know, anti-aircraft fire, it's not normal. Like, landing on the ground and hoping I don't get blown up or shot at is not normal. I can't, there's no way my body can adapt to that, right? So for that next how many ever years that I'm in that, my body is going to be throwing adrenaline and cortisol nonstop all the time, because I feel threatened, because I actually am threatened. And then that's something that I'm going to need professional help to get me out of that, to establish a new normal. But I will never go back to being the person I was before I was in that situation. It's not possible. my body is altered. My
Absolutely.
mind is altered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder is a whole other conversation, but
Yeah.
it can happen to people who don't jump out of airplanes. It can happen to
Oh, for
normal people
sure.
like me, who live under stress for too long
Mm,
and can't tell if I'm ever going to go back to normal, right?
mm,
It's your body just freaking out.
yeah. We talked about that actually. I was sharing with you my own experience speaking of anxiety. I thought like, oh, I don't experience anxiety ever. And then one day I'm just driving down the road and it hit me that actually I do and have, and I've just learned how to maintain it at this low hum that's just always there. This was years
Yeah.
ago. You don't realize that that's what you're carrying. That's your norm, right? But it's not. It's not normal. But it has become your norm. And I also just want to say, based on everything that you just shared, that I think a lot of people that might have gone through a similar experience that you and Shane went through could look at it and say, yeah, it's so much easier to just be like that. This is a stressful job. All the things that you shared about, that we don't normally think of that pastors do. There aren't many things that I think about boundaries, like how in the world there's just so many things that they have to be available for, right? That we don't think about. I personally hadn't thought about all the things that you listed, but it's all the things. Anyway,
And none of that is on the schedule. Like,
right.
people's crises are not on the schedule. So the 40-hour week
Exactly.
is already planned. The meetings and the
Yep.
sermon prep and the public speaking and the counseling and all the events you have to go to, all of that's already on the schedule. And you still got to show up on Sunday and bring the house down. Like,
Yeah.
it's
You're
never
expected
okay.
to.
It's like a baseball player. Well, actually, good hitters, you expect them to strike out most of the time. A pastor is never allowed to strike out on a Sunday.
Mm,
So there's the added pressure of bringing it. A youth pastor, a youth leader can't have a crappy activity. Like, it's not an option. Every activity needs to be the one that the kids come home talking about and can't wait to go back the next time, or
yeah.
you lose your audience, right? Because
Yes.
this is all volunteer. People are just coming because they want to come. They don't have to pay to come. They can
Right.
come and get all the stuff for free. So there's a lot of pressure.
There are so many things that I don't think the average person thinks about as far as what a pastor does. And it's not just preparing the sermons and being at the meetings, but it's all the things that are not planned in the schedule that have affected or played a part in all of the stress, right? And anyway, my point was, I'm sorry that was long-winded, but my point is that even though it could be easy for you guys to go, yeah, that's too much, it's just too much. You actually looked at, yeah, this is a lot as it is, the way that we've been, managing this, but what part are we playing? Like, you took responsibility. You looked at it, not just as, I'm a victim of all of the things that you just mentioned, but am I playing a part in this? And if I am, how am I? Which I think is really honorable. So, in light of all of that, if you look back at the beginning of your ministry and your leadership, you know where I'm headed. What would you tell yourself about the two biggest themes of the books that we've been talking about today, prayer and stress, or crisis, or anything like that? What would you, reflecting back, if you could go all the way back, what would you tell your younger self about those things?
Well, I think it's a lesson that would apply to anybody, regardless of what field they went into. And then I think I've got to know who God is, and I've got to know myself. So for me, prayer is a huge part of figuring out who God is, and that might not make sense to some people, and I understand that. But there's a dependence that happens, which is pretty integral to understanding God, that I think happens when you pray. So I think I would pray more and pray better, pray from my soul, pray more desperately to try to understand God, because I waste a lot of energy on misconceptions about God.
Mm.
And then I think understanding myself earlier would have always been a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, we have stress because, our bodies are out of whack. Well, that happens because we haven't really taken the time to understand what's healthy for us and what's not healthy for us. So if I had to strip it down, it's the two things that ironically I talked about in both books is prayer and stress. And I think it's interesting that prayer can help with stress. So even alleviate it completely. But
Definitely.
I mean,
Well,
stress itself is not bad. It's that
yeah.
it always moves into distress unless we have healthy rhythms in place. So, I mean,
Yes.
tension is good. Like tension
Yeah.
brings about change. It's not
Right.
that stress is a terrible thing. So I'm using the word kind of in the broader sense. I think what we're talking specifically about is anxiety and
Mm.
distress, living in a distressed state of being. Um, Nobody has a life that's free of stress. It's not possible, but
Yeah. It's how do we deal with it? What are we doing to deal with it? That matters
mhm.
most, I think. Yeah. That's a great thing to tell your younger self, I think. If we could only have known ourselves, really known ourselves when we were younger, right? That
Yeah.
that's part of the journey. That's part of, I think for me, it has been, and honestly, getting to a place where I do know myself better, and it does allow me to be more authentic, and it feels like freedom, like we were talking about earlier. So I love it. I want to talk before we end. I do want to mention the Stress Test podcast. Guys, you have to check that out. It's so awesome. It's for leaders and ministers, pastors. But I want to know just, you've been doing this for, I think, like a year now, right? At least. And I
Hmm.
would love to know, as you have these really impactful conversations about stress and about leadership, um, what's been some significant or impactful conversations, or maybe insights that you've gained having this podcast and talking to leaders? What do you think you've taken away so far?
Well, I think I've said some of them already, but I think one is that everybody has catalytic moments where they have to readjust the trajectory of their life, how they're doing things, what direction they're going in. Everybody has, though. It's not a failure that I'm not a failure when my body shuts down and I need a week to decompress and I don't know who I am and don't know if I want to do this anymore or whatever. Like that's normal body rhythm. Hello, pay attention to it. But I think it's very affirming to know that everybody has this. Every
Yeah.
great leader has this
Yeah.
happen on more than one occasion.
Mm-hmm.
I think a universal theme among all the people that we talk to, a universal theme is this idea of healthy rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
They're intentional about what they eat, about their exercise, about their work schedule, about delegation, which is huge, delegating away the things that bring stress to somebody who's more gifted in that area. If I have a lot of anxiety and stress over something, it's probably because I'm not uniquely crafted to do this thing. So maybe I'm in the wrong position, or maybe I just need to be less of a control freak and delegate away the things that don't bring me joy and don't help me live as my truest version of myself. Most leaders and most of us spend the majority, I don't remember the statistic, it might be 80% or something, spend the majority of our time on tasks that aren't in our highest gifting.
Mm.
It just has to be done, or it's expected that a person in my position will do XYZ. What a chronic waste of talent and energy.
Wow.
But it takes reflection and it takes humility and it takes some vulnerability to say, hey, I'm not good at this. I'm going to give this to another person,
Mm-hmm.
and be okay with the fact that some people will think that makes you less of a good leader
Mm.
or less of a person because you're off ramping something. Um, so I think the rhythms are really important. Sleep. I think I have way underestimated the importance of
Mm-hmm.
sleep. I used to pride myself on being able to be high performing on 5 or 6 hours. Well, that's lovely, but that's actually not how my body was created to function. It's
Yeah,
created to need 8 hours. When have I ever gotten 8 hours in the last 30 years?
right.
Not very often. So, creating, yeah, all the rhythms. I think those are probably the biggest things. Um, there has to be time for restoration,
Mm-hmm.
and restoration is different from rest. We talk about this in the book quite a bit. Rest is when I just need to sleep. Restoration is in rest, I'm trying to get back to normal, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm depleted. So I'm trying to get back to my normal level of functioning. And restoration is above normal level. Like I am fully fulfilled. I'm overflowing. It's an abundance concept, which is
Yeah.
all over the Bible. But living in an abundance mentality instead of a depletion mentality, which is kind of ironic in our country. We're obsessed with abundance, yet we live in depletion.
Hmm.
And most of the world has the opposite. I mean, I go on missions trips all over the place to places where people have absolutely nothing. They live in depletion, and yet they have an abundance mentality. They have joy because they have different values.
So
They
true.
expect something different out of life. I think that's an important rhythm, and it's not one that you will just fall into. It has to be groomed, trained.
Yeah, that's so good. Another reel for us. I have so many reels. It's going to be amazing once I figure out how to do it. But friend, I have loved our conversation. Thank you for taking this time and sitting with me. It feels like, like what we do. We just get to sit and talk about all the things.
And I
We
usually
do
do
that
most
well.
of the talking.
No, we equally do the talking, but this is all about you. And I'm so excited to share the world with you. And before we go, I want you to share how can the listeners follow you, give all of the information of how they can follow you and also buy your books. But before, actually, hold one moment, because I also want to know what's upcoming because you had a book before these two and then you have an upcoming book. Can you just give us a sneak peek, just a little bit into that? Just share a little bit about that, please.
Okay. So the best way to get a hold of me is my website, which is just my name.com. So Sue Schlesman, got to look up the spelling of Schlesman. I'm sorry. Maybe JC will give it to you.
Yes.
SueSchlesman.com. And I have newsletter, blogs, book stuff there.
Love your newsletter.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. We have a little landing page for the Death by Pastoring book, which is deathbypastoring.com. It's written for pastors, but I think JC could speak to this. I think it would be helpful to any person or any leader for sure.
Absolutely. That's what I found.
Thank you. And there's ordering information on that. I mean, books are all available on Amazon and all the normal book places. You can also buy from the individual publishers. The Death by Pastoring has a study guide. It also has a master class. We taped 6 classes. We have coaching available. I wrote a children's book when I was in college, actually for a college project, and had it published after college, I guess, when it came out. I co-authored a children's Bible storybook, which is coming out this fall, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, it's called the Compassion Bible Storybook, and it takes stories of injustice, mostly in scripture, normal everyday people, rather than, it's not a superhero Bible, it's a normal people Bible. And I find it very encouraging, and for kids, and it will be for the parents too, that these stories that we read about, these narratives about these people who had amazing faith and did so many remarkable things, had lives of suffering and dysfunction and anxiety. They had all the normal stuff we have. But anyway, so excited about that. Stress Test Podcast is, you can find on any of the podcast platforms. You can probably best to subscribe. Well, I guess you can subscribe anywhere, but YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the stuff.
All the places.
Is that enough? Did I cover
That's
everything?
great. No, it's awesome. Thank you. And I just have to say, you're in the perfect setting. I got to see your beautiful she shed. I just love that we're having this talk and you're there in the she shed and with
should
the books all
I
behind
pan?
you.
Should I pan?
You should definitely pan.
All right,
We all
so
wanna
I'm
see.
getting light in there, but anyway.
I love it.
I won't show you the wall that has all my files on it and my binders, because I'm a writer and a teacher, so everything important is in a binder. But
Absolutely.
anyway.
It's the perfect spot. It's adorable. It's perfect size. It's great. It's just right outside of, its own little place outside of your home, just tucked away into your beautiful lawn. By the way, you have just a beautiful lawn. But anyway,
that's thanks to the people who lived here before me. But
well, it's still there, and they're in all of their blooms right now.
Yeah, the azaleas are great right now.
I bet. Well, thank you for sitting down with me, friend. I love you, and it's been a joy to have this conversation. I'm excited for you and for Shane about this new book, and I just really appreciate your time. It's been awesome.
Thank you, JC. Love you and love what you're doing on Thrivery. It's, again, amazing how our priorities and our ministry and our heart's desires overlap. Must be hot in here. My glasses keep fogging up, but yeah. Thank you. Alignment. That's the right word.
Alignment. Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
Thank you for having me on this. This was super fun, and I've been excited about it for a while now.
Awesome. And thank you, listeners. Thanks, friends, for being here today for another episode of Thrivery, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Thrivery podcast. I hope this discussion inspired you in your pursuit of elevated living. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow us, click the share button and send to friends, and also tag us in your socials. For more information and to stay connected, visit our website at thrivery.life. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time. In October 2023, amidst the breathtaking Montana mountains, a Thrivery experience emerged, giving life to its inaugural retreat, Ascend. Surpassing all expectations, this transformative event brought together over a dozen women in an immersive experience that left them empowered to uncover the visions and dreams that echoed in their hearts. Ascend transcended the typical retreat experience. It evolved into a shared odyssey of self-discovery, where every woman discovered a supportive sisterhood dedicated to the pursuit of an elevated life. The memories forged during Ascend will be cherished as an endearing chapter in Thrivery, and we're doing it again this year. I'm thrilled to announce the upcoming THRIVERY experience for 2024. Innermost. Innermost will be held at an exclusive luxury property in 30A Seaside, Florida, on September 20th through the 22nd. The beach home is a haven of luxury in a coastal paradise, nestled in the charming and iconic town known for its pastel homes and white sand beaches. This spacious property is brand new, has lavishly appointed bedrooms and bathrooms, a custom-designed kitchen, and multiple common areas. The nearby beach is full of tranquil coastal charm, and the picturesque town is brimming with shopping, restaurants, and more. For more information and to save your spot, visit thrivery.store.